Okay. Okay. This is actually my first time trying to use the YouTube live option. So one of the reason I wanted to correct this first homework with the YouTube stream was to try the option for the first time because that might be a tool I use in the future. So I hope I'm not really expecting a lot of people to watch this live, but if anyone is watching and there's any issue, so I do apologize in advance, and you can let me know. I think you can send like messages in the chat and everything. Anyway, so the goal of this video is to talk about the tenses of the past in French, and we will see specifically why we should do this. Okay, so normally should be working. Okay, so recently on the YouTube community tab, I have published a few questions like this of how do you say this sentence in French, because I was interested in seeing the answers from the people, and I was right to do this, I think, because I have noticed that grammar seems to still be difficult for a lot of people. Right here, for example, I put the sentence how to say I love pasta with olive oil, and I was a bit surprised to see that 64% out of 100 people put j'aime les pâtes avec l'huile d'olive instead of de l'huile d'olive. So it kind of tells me that there are some interesting grammar reviews, I think, to make in the future. And one of these questions recently was about past tenses, like the tenses of the past. And about 50% of people got it right. It was a difficult question because it was using le plus-que-parfait, which is like the most advanced of the commonly used past tenses in French. So that's what I want to review today using the homeworks that has been submitted by the students. If you have noticed, maybe, if you look at all the possible conjugations in French, you may have noticed that among them, 4 are present tenses, which makes sense because there's only one way in French to talk about the present. And so we have one way for each mode, right? Indicatif, subjonctif, conditionnel, impératif. Then we only have 2 future tenses. They only belong to the indicatif, right? But we have that's actually a bit crazy when you see it like this, I think. We actually have 11 different past tenses. To be fair, we don't use all of them anymore. Some of them are really outdated. I'm thinking of especially imparfait subjonctif, plus-que-parfait subjonctif. These are really old school, outdated, and you almost never see them anymore. So among all these 11 past tense, I would say there are really 3 that are the main ones, which are passé composé, imparfait, plus-que-parfait. These are the 3 tenses that you have seen in the course or in the textbook if you studied between A1 and B2 level, right? So this is what I want to review today. Quick introduction. There are 11 different past tenses in French. We're going to do a quick review of passé composé, imparfait, plus-que-parfait, how to use them together, looking at a lot of examples from the students' homework. Finally, a super important reminder. And at the end, I would just correct formally the student homeworks. Okay. So about these homeworks, this was the very first on the NLF Academy platform. It was a free writing exercise about just writing about a childhood memory using past tenses. And so we had defined kind of like 3 levels of difficulty. Passé composé for beginner, passé composé et imparfait for intermediate, passé composé imparfait plus que parfait for more advanced students. So, like, congratulations, honestly, to all the students who submitted their homeworks, because not only they are very interesting and very fun for some of them as well, but you can really see that you put some effort into it, which is really great to see actually. So it was a real pleasure to correct them and to correct them at the end of this video. Okay, so shout out to all the students who submitted the homeworks. It's really great actually to see them. Oh, the three tenses of the past, we talked about it already in the course. So I have defined here kind of 5 levels of learning past tenses in French. The first one that you have seen in the A1 course on the platform is what we call passé récent. This is when you say things like je viens de faire à manger, je viens d'aller au cinéma, etc. This is not a real conjugation tense. This is just a way of using the présent to say that you just did something. Just like futur proche for the future, right? When you say je vais aller au cinéma, this is not like a real conjugation tense. This is just a way to use present to talk about the future. Then in the A1 course, you have seen the number one big topic of A1, which is passé composé. Then in the A2 level, usually we study in detail imparfait. Then in B1 level, we study in detail plus-que-parfait. So here we are, the 3 most common tenses. And then the whole challenge is to use all of them together, because if you do formal exercises about passé composé, imparfait ou plus-que-parfait by themselves, obviously you can do them if you study properly. But to use these 3 tenses together, this is the real challenge, right? Okay. So, passé composé, imparfait, plus que parfait. Passé composé, as you know, is really the tense we use to say that something happened, like an action happened in the past and now it's finished. When I say, for example, j'ai mangé une pomme ce matin, it's like I ate an apple this morning. This is something I did. This is an action. Something happened in the past. And now I'm not eating anymore. This was this morning. But when I'm using imparfait, for example, en 1996, j'avais 14 ans, nothing is happening. It's like at the time, I was 14. That's not an action. That's not something that's happening. That's more like a description of how things were at the time. You know, nothing is really happening. I'm not saying that I did something. I'm saying that things were like that at the time. That's a description. Finally, plus que parfait, as you know, is to talk about something that happened even before something else that was already in the past. Par exemple, mardi, j'ai mangé la pomme que j'avais achetée lundi. Monday is before Tuesday, right? So Tuesday, I ate the apple that I had bought even before on Monday. Okay? We're going to review it more in detail afterwards. Passé composé, how to say something happened in the past. I don't formally review the grammar because that's all in the course, but as you know, we have one sujet, one auxiliaire that can be avoir ou être, and then this strange special form of the verbs that we call participe passé. Okay? In most cases, the auxiliaire that I use is avoir. For example, j'ai mangé une pomme. Okay. But in some cases, I use être instead of avoir, mostly for the 17 verbs that are usually summarized in what we call la maison d'être, right? So whenever I want to conjugate one of these verbs in passé composé, I use être. That's what you do when you say, for example, il est né, je suis né, I was born, da da da. Okay. Or by default for any pronominal verb. Tous les verbes pronominaux, I will use être all the time. Par exemple, je me suis lavé ce matin. About participe passé, all the verbs of the first group will end in et. Okay. All the verbs of the second group will end in I. And as always, the verbs of the third group are irregular, so you can have anything. Okay, that's it for the grammar reminder of passé composé. Now I want to check some example from the student homeworks. So, okay, usually because I record the videos, I tell you to pause the video here, do the exercise, and then play the video again. So right now I cannot do this, obviously, but so I will leave some time. Read the sentence here. Can you spot a mistake in passé composé? So this is from Jason's homework. L'après-midi, nous avons allé chez mes grands-parents, j'ai vu mes cousins et j'ai joué avec eux. Can you spot a mistake right here? Mistake about passé composé. By the way, I am not absolutely not trying to uh, like highlight the mistakes of the students. I mean, I'm trying to highlight their mistakes, but in a good way, you know. Like I'm not trying to say that the writing is bad or anything like you. It's way better to actually try the exercise and make a lot of mistakes and then understand them rather than uh, not trying the exercise, you know. Okay. Okay, Cathy, nous sommes exactly. That's exactly right. Nous sommes allés, right? Because as we saw, actually, I think you cannot see it because my face is hiding it. But at the bottom right of the screen, there's aller, and obviously, the verb aller is using être for passé composé. Okay. Then, so that's the right answer. C'est bon. Other example still from Jason. Le soir, nous regardons ensemble la TV. I think I think it's quite easy because for now we're still in passé composé. So we will have, of course, regarder is a verb of the first group. So the participe passé will be nous avons regardé. Right? Très bien. So right now should be easy, I think. Then we actually have writing from Cathy. On a commencé à courir, je suis tombé et j'ai regardé derrière moi. Mais ce moment-là, ma grande sœur est arrêtée de courir. So, two sentences. Each sentence has something you can correct, like a small mistake you can spot about passé composé. I'm just talking about passé composé here. So I leave some time maybe to check. So first thing is if the name, so okay, this one is maybe a bit tricky, but if the name of the person who write is Cathy, then I can imagine that this is a woman. And I know that when I use passé composé with l'auxiliaire être, I have to accorder the participe passé with the sujet. So I will have tomber et e, right? Fair enough. This is an interesting mistake because you wouldn't do this with avoir. For example, arrêter, the verb arrêter here, is not part of la maison d'être. It's not pronominal as well. So by right, there's no reason to use être instead of avoir. Donc, ma grande sœur a arrêté de courir. And because now I'm using avoir, I won't write EE. So even though this is technically a mistake, that's actually a very, very interesting example. OK? Très bien. Maintenant, imparfait. The strange thing with imparfait is that, as you know, it's a bit more complex than passé composé, the way to use it. But the conjugation itself is extremely easy because unlike passé composé, there's no auxiliaire. The endings are the same for every single verb of every single group. So like there's not much recap of the grammar to do. What's interesting here is when to use it. Okay. Par exemple, je marchais 1 heure par jour. I was walking 1 hour per day. I'm not saying I walked this morning at 11 a.m. I'm not saying I did something precisely. I'm saying, like, at the time, I was walking 1 hour per day. Avec mes amis, nous aimions discuter. So you see, it's like I'm kind of describing how things were in the time, you know? Like, for example, when we were young, etc. Nous finissions de discuter très tard. You remember, for imparfait, les verbes du deuxième groupe, I add this is like this. Okay? Nous finissions de discuter très tard. Je choisissais mon plat sur le menu. I was choosing my dish on the menu. In all these examples, nothing is happening. There's no like real action happening. Okay? And even though some verbs are irregular, technically, the endings are still the same. Quand j'étais petit, j'avais peur du noir et je faisais des cauchemars. When I was young, I was scared of the dark and I did a lot of nightmares. Same, I am not saying I did a nightmare last night. I'm saying when I was young, I used to do this, da da da. Okay? Another example from the Cathy writing here. It's a bit longer text. Can you spot a mistake, like an interesting mistake, about imparfait? So I give you a minute maybe to read the text. Can you spot something about imparfait here? Donc, le cimetière était un immense champ vert avec des tombes. Au centre du champ, il y avait 2 ou 3 tombes de plus. Pendant que ma mère fait l'appel, nous avons décidé de nous promener dans le cimetière. Donc cimetière is a graveyard like this. Alors, le cimetière était un immense champ vert avec des tombes. That's exactly the way to use imparfait. I am describing something in the past. The graveyard was a huge green field with tombs. Au centre du champ, il y avait 2 ou 3 tombes, etc. But then, pendant que ma mère, and then this is still something that was happening in the scene. So, all the reason to put this at imparfait. Pendant que ma mère faisait l'appel, and here it's very interesting, you see exactly what's the dynamic between imparfait et passé composé. You have pendant que da 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 avec imparfait, like while this was happening, so it's not really an action, it's something that was happening in time. Then something happened, and this is why here, nous avons décidé, this is passé composé, interrupting suddenly. You know? That's the dynamic between passé composé et imparfait. That's the dynamic between them. Imparfait is used to describe how things are, and then something happens, we have passé composé. So we have a lot of great examples in the homeworks. For example, this homeworks from Alexander is absolutely perfect in terms of passé composé. Quand j'étais petit, je suis allé au jardin d'enfants. So I went to the school, to the child playground. And then I have like a list of things that happened that day, exactly the way to use passé composé. This happened and then this happened. Tous les enfants sont venus avec leurs parents. Les parents ont parlé. Les enfants ont joué. Nous sommes restés jusqu'à la nuit. Nous avons joué au ballon et d'autres jeux. C'était très heureux. Okay? Like that's really the way to use passé composé. That's a really really great example. You have everything here. I went to the playground. I'm just saying that something happened in the past. And then I'm enumerating all the action that happened. Très bien. Now, if I look at the writing of Joy here, it's also really good in terms of imparfait. Quand j'étais enfant, je passais souvent les vacances d'été avec ma famille et ma grand-mère. Elle travaillait dans les trains, donc j'avais beaucoup d'opportunités de voyager parce que c'était plus facile d'acheter des billets. Everything here is at imparfait because nothing is happening. I'm not saying that I just did this at the time. I'm describing things. Look at this. Quand j'étais enfant, I'm telling the context of the story. Okay, so that's happening when I was a child. Je passais souvent les vacances d'été avec ma famille. That's a habit. I'm expressing a habit. I used to do this. You see, I have souvent here. I used to often. I spend the summer holidays, da da da. Then I describe how things were. I explain. I described how was the situation at the time. Elle travaillait dans les trains. Donc j'avais beaucoup d'opportunités, etc. That's a super great example of how to use imparfait. If I go back to the writing of Alexander, I also have some imparfait here and there. Quand j'étais petit, that's the context of a story. Quand j'étais petit, je suis allé au jardin d'enfants. So when I was a kid, I went there. By the way, this implies that I went there like once as an action that happened, not as a habit. We see this later. Okay? C'était très heureux. Le week-end, c'était le plus amusant. I am describing how the things were at the time. OK? Très bien. Writing from Jacqueline. Quand j'avais 8 ou 9 ans, mes parents ont décidé de prendre mon petit frère. And that's my mistake here. This should be green and this should be red. OK. Quand j'avais 8 ans, I'm telling the context of the story. When I was 8 or 9, my parents decided, no, they did something. And this structure is super common. I'm using imparfait to tell the context of the story. And then when something happens, I have passé composé. OK. From Cathy, il y a longtemps, quand j'étais petite, when I was young, je suis allée au village de mes grands-parents pendant les vacances de l'école. Something happened. I did this. Okay. This is not a habit. I am not saying I used to go there every summer. I'm talking about this one time I went there. That's an action that happened once. Okay. Très bien. So the dynamic is always the same between passé composé, imparfait. Going back to the writing of Alexander, look at the sentence here. Quand j'étais petit, je suis allé au jardin d'enfants. Ici en Bulgarie, les enfants dorment l'après-midi, mais je n'ai pas aimé dormir. Grammatically, there's no mistake. Like grammatically, you cannot spot a grammar mistake. But in terms of logic, can you spot something strange? In terms of the dynamic between passé composé et imparfait. How can I make this more natural? Like there's a kind of an issue here. Quoi ça? Hmm. So, quand j'étais petit, je suis allé au jardin d'enfants. Ici en Bulgarie, les enfants dorment l'après-midi, mais je n'ai pas aimé dormir. Obviously, when I say je n'ai pas aimé dormir, what I mean is way more natural. Je n'aimais pas dormir. Because what I'm saying is at the time when I was young, I didn't like to sleep. That's why it makes more sense to use imparfait all the way, because I am still describing the situation. I'm not saying that this one time, this one day, I didn't like to sleep. I'm saying at the time when I was a kid, I didn't like sleeping. Okay? Très bien. I hope the example makes sense. Example from Kenny. Quand j'étais petit, je n'ai pas aimé parler. En fait, j'ai eu peur de parler avec les autres personnes. Ma mère pensait que c'était un problème. Again, here, technically, grammatically, zero mistake, but it doesn't sound natural. Can you see how to make this more natural? How we would actually say in French? Eh ben, quand j'étais petit, when I was young, je n'ai pas aimé parler. Je n'ai pas aimé parler. When I'm using passé composé, it implies that this is an action that happened. So it's like this one time, I didn't like to talk. But what the person means here is really quand j'étais petit, je n'aimais pas parler. It's like it's how things were at the time. As a kid, I didn't like to speak. En fait, j'avais peur de parler. I was afraid to speak with other people. Okay? That's can you see the difference between them? This one would be talking about one time I didn't want to talk and I have been afraid, like this morning. But this one is when I was young, I didn't like to speak. Like that's a description of my habit when I was young. Okay. Last example, I think, from Cathy. On a été en train de regarder les tombes du centre quand nous avons vu les moutons courir. So in this example, the situation is exactly the same than the two previous examples. The situation is on était en train de regarder les tombes. We were in this state. We were watching the tombs. And suddenly, we saw, on a vu the ships running towards us. Okay? So it's like we were in this situation and suddenly something happens. Pardon. On était en train de regarder les tombes quand nous avons vu les moutons courir. Here, if you think about it logically, it really makes sense to use imparfait with en train de. Because we are in the middle of doing something and bim, suddenly something happens. OK? Très bien. Alors ici, from the writing of Joy, is this a mistake or no? Le lendemain, nous avons décidé de monter sur la grande muraille de Chine. Quand nous étions très fatigués, nous nous sommes rendus compte que nous avions oublié les sandwichs sur la table de la chambre d'hôtel. What is this here? Nous avions oublié. Nous avions is imparfait, hmm? Mais oublié is the participe passé of passé composé. So, is it a mistake? Why do I have both? Obviously, the answer is no. It's not a mistake. This is, look at the situation. Quand j'étais petite, avec ma famille, nous avons décidé de monter sur la grande muraille de Chine. So now I'm an adult. I'm telling a story. Now is today. Now is Thursday, 25 September 2025. Everything here is in the past. All of this is a story. When I was young, with my family, we have decided to go on the Great Wall of China. When we were very tired, we realized that we had forgotten our sandwich on the table of the hotel room. All of these stories in the past. So, me being on the Great Wall of China is in the past. It's not happening today. I'm telling you a story of what happened in the past. But if you look at this, the fact that we forgot the sandwich must have happened before we were on the Great Wall of China, because that's the point of the story. When we arrived on the wall, we realized that, oh man, when we left the hotel like 2 hours ago, we forgot the sandwich. And this is what we call plus-que-parfait. This is the grammar I use to say that something happened before something else, but everything is in the past. This is the past of the past. Okay? And the conjugation is exactly like passé composé. The rules are the same, everything is the same, but the auxiliaire is conjugated at imparfait. So that's really a mix between imparfait et passé composé. Okay? I don't review the grammar in detail because there's a whole course about it. Okay. Donc, right now, I'm telling the story. Everything happens in the past. Before being on the wall, which is already in the past, this happened before. And I'm using plus-que-parfait to really imply grammatically that this happened even before something else. Okay. Un autre exemple. Heureusement, so we are on the wall of China, the Great Wall of China, but we realize that we have forgotten the sandwich. Heureusement, ma mère avait acheté une boîte de chocolat pour ma meilleure amie. Finalement, nous avons seulement partagé cette boîte et à ce moment-là, c'était le meilleur chocolat que j'ai jamais mangé. So, fortunately, my mother had bought a box of chocolate. And in the end, because we forgot the sandwich, we ate the box of chocolate. So, again, for the story to make sense, like the story makes sense only if buying the box of chocolate happened before we are on the wall. Because the whole point of the story is that we are on the wall, we don't have anything to eat, but oh, yes, mom bought chocolate before, like the day before or 2 days before. So again, this is why I'm using plus que parfait to imply that this, ma mère avait acheté une boîte de chocolat. This happened before being on the wall. But being on the wall is already in the past. So buying the chocolate is the past of the past. And to show this grammatically, I use plus que parfait. OK? Très bien. Now, extremely important reminder about this is maybe the most important thing of the actually this is the most important thing of the whole video. This video and these explanations are for you hopefully to understand better the dynamic between these different tenses. Okay, but when you are actually having a conversation with someone in French, obviously you don't have time in your mind to think, oh, should I put these sentences passé composé, imparfait? Is it something that happened? Or is it a description? Or is it the past of the past? Like, that's it. Like, you cannot think about this. So, learning to jongler, juggle, I think, learning to switch, learning to switch naturally, fluently between the different tenses of the past can only happen with practice. Like, to be able to hold the conversation in French and to actually say natural sentences at imparfait, passé composé, etc. This can only happen if you practice the brain mechanics of speaking in French. Learning, studying formal grammar and rules like this is necessary because you have to know what's the rule to be able to for you to know that okay, this makes sense, this is logical, this is how to say. But you can study the rules and do exercises on your notebook as much as you want. As long as you don't speak with someone, you will never work the mechanics of the brain to have a conversation in French. So this is just a reminder that for advanced, especially for advanced topic like this, you must practice conversation in French. Okay? You can do this on the platform directly by applying for the private classes or the group classes. Or I made a whole video about it. You can use free websites that are actually good, like Tandem, that I like, for example. And I repeat this many, many, many times for you to study French by yourself with a course online. It only makes sense if you have a speaking practice with someone on the side. Okay, only makes sense. And if the budget is the issue, just go for free websites like Tandem. Even the free version of this website are super good actually. Like literally, if you do this seriously, you can use it. Okay, I think that's it for the formal review of the grammar. The next weekly homework, which will be 2 weeks from now, will be a bit different. I will actually publish like a whole episode of the 90s super famous TV show, Les Aventures de Tintin. This is 40 minutes long, super interesting because they use a lot of very interesting vocabulary, and the way they speak French is from the 90s and is very interesting. You will have French subtitles as well. So the homeworks will be to watch the 40-minute episode of Les Aventures de Tintin in French with French subtitles. And then you will have a few questions and a free writing exercise to do about the story of Tintin, about the episode. Okay? This will be 1 week, 1 or 2 weeks from now. That's the end of the formal review of the grammar. Now I will just correct the homeworks of the student. So that's it for the grammar. Now let's go for correction. C'est parti. Alors, Alexander, quand j'étais petit, je suis allé au jardin d'enfants. Donc la première chose, first of all, if I'm a man, I would say aller et, right? No e. But as I was saying, it makes more sense to say j'allais au jardin d'enfants. I would rather use imparfait because that's it. To me, it sounds like a description. When I was young, I used to go to jardin d'enfants. Ici en Bulgarie, les enfants dorment l'après-midi, mais, and same, I explained this one earlier, je n'aimais pas dormir. Ok, imparfait. Très bien. Comme j'ai habité près, ma grand-mère est venue me chercher tous les jours. You see here, I cannot have, this is very interesting, I cannot have passé composé with tous les jours. Like that's an actual mistake. Think about it. We know that imparfait is the tense we use to describe a habit in the past. So if I say tous les jours, necessarily I must have imparfait. Ma grand-mère est venue, non, venez me chercher. By the way, this writing is from an A1 student who I believe haven't studied imparfait yet. So the writing is really great. All the writings I have received are really great, actually. Because I'm correcting them, I'm only talking about the mistakes, but this doesn't mean that the writings are bad. On the contrary, these are very good. Same here, comme j'habitais, imparfait. Comme j'habitais près, ma grand-mère venait me chercher tous les jours quand c'était l'heure de dormir. À ce moment, mon frère avait un ordinateur avec Windows XP. J'ai joué toujours avec A. Ok. J'ai joué à beaucoup de jeux vidéo. Je peux mettre un tiret et un S. Comme j'ai comme j'étais à Vice City. Ok, j'ai joué aussi. Et Balance, je connais pas. J'ai passé beaucoup de temps devant l'ordinateur, très bien. Le week-end, c'était le plus amusant. Dans mon quartier, il y a quelques immeubles. Et au centre, so here, to me, it makes sense to say il y a in the present tense because un quartier is not something that changes a lot over time. So when I say il y a, it means that there was at the time, but there are still now. Like it's still true now. So present tense is okay. Il y a quelques immeubles et au centre, un petit parc pour jouer avec des arbres. Tous les enfants sont venus. So here, it's the same. It makes more sense to use imparfait everywhere, honestly. Venaient avec leurs parents. Les parents parlaient. Because all of this is a habit, is a memory. Les parents parlaient et les enfants jouaient. Nous sommes restés, same, nous restions jusqu'à la nuit. Nous jouions au ballon et à d'autres jeux, because the A doesn't distribute, so nous jouions à le ballon, donc au ballon et à d'autres jeux. Ouais, c'était très heureux, très bien. Writing from Kenny, same A1 level as well. Quand j'étais petit, so I talked about this one as well. Quand j'étais petit, first of all, quand j'étais petit, it makes sense to have imparfait because I'm giving the context of the story when I was a kid. So everything from now on is in the past. And if I use passé composé, it's an action that happened in time. But here, this is really about a habit of how I was when I was a kid, right? I explained this one. So it makes more sense to use imparfait. Je n'aimais pas parler. En fait, pareil ici, hein, exactly the same. J'avais peur de parler avec les autres personnes. Ma mère pensait que c'était un problème car je n'avais n'avais pas d'amis. OK. Le matin d'école, OK, j'ai pris juste la bonne somme d'argent de ma mère. OK. Je suis montré à la boulangerie, je n'ai pas dit bonjour. Alors here, I think je suis allé makes more sense. Je suis allé à la boulangerie. Le matin d'école, so this is one day, but I kind of want to say les matins d'école as a habit, like school mornings, les matins d'école. And then everything should be in imparfait actually. Donc je prenais les matins d'école. Je prenais juste la bonne somme d'argent de ma mère. But here I will assume this is a one-time thing. OK. Donc le matin d'école. Allez, un matin d'école. One school morning. J'ai pris juste la bonne somme d'argent de ma mère. Je suis allé à la boulangerie. Je n'ai pas dit bonjour. J'ai pointé le pain que je voulais. OK. Imparfait. Because I wanted the bread, but that's not an action. That's how I was in my mind. I wanted this one. Ensuite, j'ai payé avec la bonne somme d'argent. OK. Enfin, je suis parti. S'il y a de la monnaie, le boulanger a dû parler avec moi. OK, this is a C sentence. This is a complicated sentence. S'il y a de la monnaie, le boulanger. Si c'était petite monnaie, j'ai laissé la monnaie. This is complicated sentence because you have to use conditionnel passé if you want to make this. S'il y a de la monnaie, I will just put it at present tense because that's not my point to review conditionnel and everything here. So I change a little bit. S'il y a de la monnaie, le boulanger doit parler avec moi. Si c'est de la petite monnaie, hein, de la monnaie, de la petite monnaie, je laisse, OK, je mets tout au présent maintenant. Je laisse de la monnaie, pas de conversation. Si c'était pas mal de monnaie, pas mal, OK, plus, je laisse du pain, je n'achète pas. OK. Je laisse le pain because it's the bread I wanted to buy, je n'achète pas. So this part is a bit tricky. I put everything at the present tense because if you want to express what was supposed to be expressed, you have to go into conditionnel passé, and again, that's not the point here. Ma mère a trouvé l'histoire. So that's not really what you mean. Ma mère a, allez, entendu l'histoire. Let's say it. She heard about it. Ensuite, tous les week-ends, elle m'a emmené au McDonald's. C'était mon restaurant préféré quand j'étais petit. Aller à, emmener à. Elle m'a donné un peu grand de papier d'argent. Mmh. Elle m'a donné un papier d'argent, I guess is a bill. Elle m'a donné un gros billet, on va dire. Un gros billet, like a big bill, like 50 euros, for example. Et elle a laissé moi, if I'm the object, it will become a pronom like this. Elle m'a laissé, pas de deux, prendre un burger à la caisse. C'était trop very good use of imparfait here. Très, très bien. C'était trop difficile pour moi et je n'ai pas voulu parler avec le serveur, mais j'ai voulu manger le burger. Enfin, je lui ai dit que je n'avais plus faim. OK. Que je n'avais plus faim. That's a really great text with imparfait passé composé. Le week-end suivant. Le week-end prochain means next weekend from the moment I'm talking. But here I mean le week-end suivant. C'est où? Elle a emmené ma sœur aussi et chaque semaine, ma sœur a mangé un burger, mais pas moi. OK. OK. Après quelques semaines, j'ai commencé à demander à la caisse. OK, très bien. Je pense que cette histoire est drôle. Yeah, je suis d'accord. Il y a une période de temps, on va dire pendant. OK, French expression, very good expression. Pendant un certain temps. Pendant un certain temps is equivalent to in English for some time. OK, for some time. J'ai détesté ma mère à cause de ça, mais maintenant je veux la remercier parce que c'est une femme, la remercier de l'avoir fait. To did this. OK, très bien. It's a very nice story actually. Texte de Jason. Il y a un grand gala en Chine chaque année. OK. Il commence. Alors, if I say il y a, this is present, right? Because the gala is still happening right now every year. So no need for past actually. Il commence en janvier ou février, c'est le nouvel an chinois. Nous sommes levés souvent très tôt. Alors, here I have souvent. If I have souvent, what does it mean? You should get my point here by now. If I have souvent, it means that this is a habit, right? So I will use imparfait. Donc, au lieu de nous nous sommes levés, nous levions souvent très tôt. Mes parents ont préparé le petit déjeuner et ensuite ils ont fait les tâches ménagères. Je me suis habillé avec des nouveaux vêtements. Nouveau avec X. OK. Si c'est 12e mois, alors article, si c'est le 12e mois, mais ici, si c'est présent, je vais laisser au présent ici. Je m'habille. Tout simplement. I dress. Ouais. Je m'habille en rouge, pas de S. C'est une tradition pour les Chinois. L'après-midi, nous sommes allés sans eux, because eux would mean it's only a group of women, but that's not the case. Nous sommes allés chez mes grands-parents. J'ai vu mes cousins et j'ai joué avec eux. The pronoun here is eux, with them, right? Le soir, nous avons regardé, we talked about this one already, ensemble la télé pour le gala. C'était très amusant. Nous avons mangé les dumplings, raviolis, à minuit pour célébrer la nouvelle année. Ravioli is a bit difficult because France doesn't have, like in Chinese food overall, there are many different types of dumplings, but because we don't have this in France, we tend to call all of them ravioli. Okay. Pour célébrer la nouvelle année. OK, très bien. Jacqueline, so here, unbelievable. When I actually, she wrote, cher Nicolas et Gustave, un grand merci à vous deux. Just very quick story. When we received the homeworks, sorry, I had a Google Meet call. I was on a Google Meet call with Gustave, and I told him specifically, have you seen the picture that Jacqueline sent? Did you see her writing? The way she writes is really super nice, like super easy to read, really beautiful. And yet, you're right. Désolé pour mon écriture horrible. I cannot believe you actually think that you have a horrible writing. You have a perfect writing. And on top of having a perfect writing, there is no mistake in the text except for one, but the text is perfect. Quand j'avais 8 ou 9 ans, mes parents ont décidé de prendre mon petit frère, moi et ma grande sœur en vacances d'été, en camping en France. C'est parfait. Mon père a conduit tout le chemin de l'Écosse à la France. Nous avons roulé 2 jours pour arriver là, puis nous avons pris un bateau, un ferry à Calais. OK. C'était vraiment super. J'étais tellement excité. C'était la première fois que j'ai vu la France. C'est tout. The only thing. The first time I saw France, la première fois que j'ai vu la France. If you think about it, c'était la première fois is one conjugated sentence. J'ai vu la France is another conjugated sentence. So I need something in between, right? C'était la première fois que j'ai vu la France. Et j'ai découvert une nouvelle culture. Parfait. Incroyable. Très, très bien. Ensuite, le texte de Cathy, which is also really fun. Il y a longtemps, quand j'étais petite, je suis allée au village de mes grands-parents pendant les vacances, on va dire les vacances d'école, allez, les vacances scolaires. Scolaire is the adjective for school, okay? In school, you find just like school in English, that's the same word, okay? Scolaire. Comme d'habitude, very good. I have here comme d'habitude, which means I'm talking about a habit. And guess what? I have imparfait here. OK? Quand j'étais petit, da, 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 comme d'habitude. But here, I have je suis allé, which is passé composé, which implies that everything that will follow will not be a habit. Everything that will follow will be a story that happened once. À cette époque, that's a fixed expression. OK? À cette époque. Il n'y avait pas de signal, ça va, mais c'est mieux de dire réseau, de réseau. Il n'y avait pas de réseau téléphonique là-bas. On a dû, très bien, aller au cimetière dehors, alors on va dire en dehors, pareil, expression fixe, en dehors du village pour trouver du réseau. Un jour avec ma mère, ma grande sœur, ma petite cousine et notre chien, nous y sommes allés. OK, here makes sense, right? Ma mère is a woman, ma grande sœur is a woman, ma petite cousine is a woman, mon chien, bon, it's an animal. Nous y sommes allés, donc EES makes sense. Parce que ma mère avait besoin de faire un appel. And you can say this, but an even better expression is passer. Passer un appel téléphonique. Le cimetière, c'était un immense champ vert avec des tombes tout dans le bord. Tout autour, I think. What you mean? Like all around, it's like a field with all around des tombes, tout autour. Dans le centre du champ, il y avait 2 ou 3 tombes avec un O de plus. Pendant que ma mère passait l'appel, OK, so pendant que, while something is happening, ma mère passait l'appel, les 3 enfants, nous avons décidé, I think, we decided to take a walk. Nous avons décidé de nous promener dans le cimetière et notre chien à courir derrière les moutons. Ah oui, il y avait un très, très grand groupe de moutons. OK. Un grand groupe de quelque chose. You remember le sound in unité 3, pas de, un peu de, une bouteille de, un groupe de, c'est pareil. OK. Pendant que ma mère passait l'appel, les 3 enfants, nous avons décidé de nous promener dans le cimetière et notre chien a couru, passé composé derrière les moutons. Okay, here we talked about it. If we are en train de, if we are in the middle of doing something, then it makes sense to use imparfait by default, right? On était en train de regarder les tombes du centre quand nous avons vu les moutons courir à notre direction, dans notre direction. On a commencé à courir aussi, je suis tombé et eux, j'ai regardé derrière moi, dans mon souvenir, c'est masculin, les moutons étaient, pluriel, trop grands. C'était la fin. C'était la fin. Mais à ce moment-là, when I see this, but right this moment, I know this will be passé composé, right? Because something happens. Ma grande sœur a arrêté de courir. We talked about it. Elle est venue à moi et après... Ça va pas. Sorry, I have to check my network because my network isn't so good. Après essayer de m'aider, elle a décidé de, on avait déjà ici décidé de, prendre courage, faire un mouvement et crier fortement, allez, on va dire sur les moutons. Elle crie sur les moutons. Les moutons sont allés à gauche et à droite et nous sommes restés avec S, passé composé avec être, dans le centre, au centre. Quand je suis arrivé et eux, à me lever et à regarder ma mère. I look my mom et à regarder ma mère. Elle était same I have en train de, so it makes more sense to use imparfait. Elle était en train de mourir de rire à cause de nous, sans laisser sa pelle téléphonique, sans sans passer, allez, sans passer son appel téléphonique. Et ma petite cousine, elle est restée tout en peur à côté de elle, will be d'elle, tout en peur, there's actually a word for this, apeurée. Elle est restée apeurée à côté d'elle. It's an adjective that means she's scared. OK? Très, très bien. Last one, joy. Quand j'étais enfant, je passais souvent les vacances d'été avec ma famille et ma grand-mère. Elle travaillait dans les trains, c'est parfait. Donc j'avais beaucoup d'opportunités de voyager avec eux parce qu'il est plus facile d'acheter des billets de train pour les employés, c'est parfait. What's interesting here is that we saw this extract in the beginning. Everything is imparfait except for this sentence. Ou pardon, il est plus facile. Il est plus facile, ouais. Everything is imparfait except this sentence because it is easier to buy train tickets for the employees. This sentence is still true today. This sentence doesn't belong to the past. It was true at the time, but it's still true nowadays, so I can put it present tense. Une fois, nous sommes allés à Pékin, il faisait très beau, nous avons fait une balade dans les anciennes rues, nous avons visité des palais magnifiques et nous avons aussi dégusté le célèbre canard laqué de Pékin. C'était délicieux. I give you, so this is perfect. I give you a small tip. You say nous avons fait une balade, nous avons visité. If you want it to sound even better, even more sophisticated, and you don't want to repeat nous avons, instead of faire une balade, you can use the verb se balader. It's pronominal. Nous sommes baladés. This way you avoid repeating nous avons. It sounds even better. Dans les anciennes rues, OK. Le lendemain, nous avons décidé de monter sur la grande muraille de Chine. Quand nous étions très fatigués, nous nous sommes rendus compte. Nous nous sommes rendus avec S parce que c'est un verbe pronominal, donc j'utilise l'auxiliaire être. OK, rendu S. Que nous avions oublié les sandwichs sur la table de la chambre d'hôtel et il n'y avait pas de vendeur. Si this is a super common mistake, so don't worry. If there is no vendeur, then there's no S, because there's zero, right? Il n'y avait pas de vendeur sur la grande muraille. Heureusement, ma mère avait acheté une boîte de chocolat. One box of chocolates, but many chocolates in the box, pour ma meilleure amie. Finalement, nous avons seulement partagé cette boîte et à ce moment-là, c'était le chocolat le plus délicieux que j'ai jamais mangé. Here, subjonctif, perfectly used. Très bien. C'est un souvenir que je n'oublierai, futur simple, très bien, jamais parce que nous avions très faim depuis ce voyage. Chaque fois que nous sortons, nous préparons toujours une boîte de chocolat dans le sac. That's amazing writing. Congratulations, Joy. I don't know how much time it took you to write this, but it's very impressive. C'est vraiment très, très bien. OK, c'est tout. C'est tout pour les devoirs. Il y a une question de Timothy. Timothy, je voudrais demander, en général, combien de mois avons-nous besoin de réussir au niveau C1 d'un niveau A2? Okay, so I don't know if you're still there, but I will give you a very quick answer. Attends. How much time do you need to go from A2 to C1 is very difficult to answer because I don't know what you mean by A2 and I don't know what you mean by C1. The reason for this is that because of academics and exams, a lot of students tend to see A1, A2, B1, B2 as if it were separated categories when it's really a continuum, a continuous spectrum. And when you say I am A2 level, this really doesn't really mean anything, because maybe you took DELF A2 exam, for example, and you passed it, so you can consider that you are A2 level, and fair enough from an academic point, from an academic level, it's true. But maybe your writing is way better than your speaking, or maybe your speaking is way better than your writing. And so, how would you define what level you are if that's the case? You know what I mean? So, how much time do you need to go from A2 to C1 really depends on what you mean by A2 right now. And I would say it depends on, okay, it depends on what do you mean by your current A2 level. It depends on how much time do you have to study every day. It depends on how easy or difficult is it for you to learn languages. Like if this is the fifth language that you are learning, it's way easier than it's only the second language. And the most important, do you have any way to practice speaking alongside with the course you're following, and do you have a proper course to follow? I would say that's the most important thing. Can show you so attends, wait 1 minute. Où est-ce que c'est? Hmm. Okay, yeah. So I made a video about this. That's what I was saying, is what you don't want to be doing. I don't know, when you say you are A2 level right now, I don't know exactly what you mean, but what you absolutely don't want to be doing is watching this kind of videos on YouTube, like to write French, learning French on YouTube, and just watch like grammar videos like this. What I mean here is, I'm really, really not saying that these are bad videos. I don't think these are bad videos. I think these are good videos. The issue is that these are good videos if you know how to use them properly. If you don't know where you are in French and you watch this video about 20 rules of grammar, then fair enough, you will know 20 rules of grammar, but you still don't know where you are and when you're going in French. That was I was saying last time about the course that we have on the platform here. The whole idea of having a course, proper course like this, is to know exactly unit after unit where you are going. You do, for example, unit 1, you see how much time it takes you. Maybe you need 2 weeks to do unit 1, so you know that you need approximately 2 weeks to complete the whole thing. So now you have a proper path. You know exactly, sorry, you know that you need 2 weeks times 12 to complete the whole thing. You know exactly where you are going with a properly structured course like this. And at the same time, you practice speaking to practice the brain mechanics necessarily for speaking. Okay, the best is to hire a private teacher, go to on-site classes, meet French people in your city, but you have free alternative as well, like websites like Tandem, for example, etc., etc. I would recommend you to just go watch this video about like the proper path to learn French as efficiently as possible. But C1 is very, I understand this may be a bit disappointing answer, but C1 is a very advanced level. You can do it, but it's like, don't, you must see this as a long-term perspective, and don't think that you will get to C1 level in like 2 months or like a few months like this. This should be a long-term perspective. Okay? I hope I was able to answer your question. Ok, et c'est tout pour ce récapitulatif sur les temps du passé. Et bah, bon courage. Merci encore à tous les étudiants qui ont envoyé leurs devoirs, c'était très, très bien. Rendez-vous dans 2 semaines pour le devoir numéro 2. See you in 2 weeks for the homeworks number 2, which will be really fun as I was saying. The goal is to watch, an episode of Les Aventures de Tintin et c'est tout. Ciao mon pote.